talked about last week, I really am impressed with the book that you've written and what you're saying about appreciation in America. It's, frankly, I think this is a message that doesn't get out there enough, the good stuff.
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate you saying that. You know, part of the reason that I wrote Focus on the Good Stuff is because I do think it's something that, while simple, is very important. Yeah. And I really feel like we have an epidemic in our culture on a personal level and then on a cultural level where we're just obsessed with negativity. We're obsessed with what we think, you know, our weaknesses are. We're obsessed with other people's weaknesses. We're obsessed with, you know, bad things that happen in the world. And again, as you know, and you read Focus on the Good Stuff, and as people read it, the whole first third of the book, I actually focus on the bad stuff and the negativity and why we're so obsessed with it. And it's not so much that we're supposed to avoid it or walk around with rose-colored glasses that everything's fine. It's really making a choice and realizing that, you know, one of my favorite quotes as this relates to other people, and it's in the book, is in every human being there's both garbage and gold, and it's up to us to choose what we pay attention to. Exactly. And that's really true about life. You know, it's a choice fundamentally each day.
And listeners, what I'd say on appreciation, it's very simple. It really is. When you appreciate somebody, it's a conscious choice to see the good in them, the gold as Mike calls it, but make it specific. It's not just about going by somebody and saying, good job. Good job for what?
Yeah.
If you say, good job for the project you did, I really appreciated your effort on whatever it is, make it specific. It's the old SMAC, you know, specific, measurable, actionable, what have you. Yep. Those are the important things in appreciation in my mind. Now, Mike, you give 5 lessons in the book, and I'd like to turn to lesson 1 where you say, be grateful. You know, there are times, though, where adversity is so overwhelming. Why do we start with being grateful?
Well, I personally think in the midst of the biggest adversity is the time for us to be grateful. Because usually, even when we're having a real difficult time, there's something to be grateful for. I remember being in college, actually, my junior year in college, and I suffered from clinical depression when I was in college. Even in the midst of this great life I had, you know, I'm playing baseball, I got lots of friends, and, you know, mental illness runs in my family. My father had bipolar disorder. So I, you know, was really scared and for a couple of months was just very, very depressed. And I remember one night I couldn't sleep, and anyone who's been depressed can probably relate to that. So up in the middle of the night, and I was standing at the refrigerator in my apartment, and I'm drinking a glass of lemonade. I don't know why I remember this moment, but I had this moment where I thought to myself, I'm happy. Just for that brief moment. Like, I'm okay, my life's okay, my body works, I'm alive. You know, it was a simple thing, but I took this, and I had about 10 seconds where all of a sudden I felt like I'm okay. And I remember that was actually the beginning of me coming out of that depression, because it was just that I could be grateful that I was drinking a glass of lemonade, and that I had an apartment that I mean, little things. But oftentimes when things are really tough is when we have to stop and say, okay, time out. What's going well? What good here am I not paying attention to that I could? And again, it is a choice. And look, and I don't mean to belittle people. Some people have some serious issues and challenges they're dealing with. Whether they're medical, whether they're financial, whether they're family stuff. So, you know, this is not like, oh, get over it. But really it's about, okay, in the midst of that challenge, what can you do personally, and what can the people around you do so that you focus on what you're grateful for instead of feeling victimized by whatever's happening?
I'd really like to echo that, listeners. It is focusing on the positive, it's choice. At the same time, you recognize the problems you're having, but for God's sakes, please don't think you have to go it alone. It's one of the common things I see in my own industry, the financial advice industry, people who feel so overwhelmed and they're trying to solve it on their own. Reach out to an expert, reach out to a coach, reach out to an advisor if you need one, but for heaven's sakes, don't try to do it on your own. As Hillary said, it takes a village in everything, I feel.
Well, and it's true to me. I'm glad you brought that up, and I think this is an important point. Often when I'm speaking to groups, whether, again, it's within a big corporation or even just a community group, I will often ask the audience, I'll say, how many of you like helping people? And almost everybody raises their hand, right? And then I'll say, how many of you like asking people for help? And almost nobody raises their hands. And it's always this interesting conundrum, because most of us like to help. Very few of us are comfortable asking for help. But when you think about it, if you can start to think about asking for help as a selfless act, as an opportunity to give other people the chance to support you, which most people like to do and makes them feel good, I think we as a culture and as a society and as individuals can start to really benefit from that, because there are many people like you, like me, like so many listeners who want to help, but then so many of us are too darn stubborn to actually stop and say, hey, you know what, I could use a hand, because someone give me some support here, especially, by the way, when things are tough, because that's when we all really need help.
Yeah, it's easy to say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but remember, listeners, what we say each and every week. Fiscal conservatism, social and environmental justice. What happens if you don't have any boots?
That's true.
Then there are no bootstraps. So, if you want help, reach out. There are plenty of people who are willing to. And I think to some extent it's our Puritan upbringing. Go do it alone. And I think to some extent that, in my mind, is a misconception.
I think so too. I mean, and I think at some level when we really think about what makes us powerful, what makes us courageous in life, none of us can have achieved anything we've achieved all by ourselves. Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff you and I and all of us have to do alone to some degree, but I think there's a balance there. And I think the ability to ask for what you want and ultimately to get it is something that's fundamental, you know, even as it relates to appreciation. And you said it earlier, talking about being specific.
Yes.
You know, and that's something else. I mean, I've learned this from my wife, Michelle, and she's really good at this, because when we first started dating, she told me that she, you know, this was like 7 years ago, she told me that she liked flowers, which I'd heard that before, right? But she told me she liked flowers for no reason.
Ah.
And my male brain couldn't figure that. What do you mean, no reason? It always had to be a reason. And she said, no, just because it's Tuesday, just because. So I decided after she said that I'd buy her flowers for no reason. Well, she went bananas when I gave them to her. Like, she got all excited about it. She kept thanking me, telling me how much, right? And she told me specifically how it made her feel. So I did it again. And then she got excited again and told me again. I did it again. And eventually what happened was I kept repeating the pattern because she liked it. She would acknowledge me specifically for it. 7 years later, I still buy her flowers for no reason all the time. And it's not because I'm some wonderful, amazing person necessarily. I don't even like flowers. But she likes them. And she told me about it, and she was very specific about it, and once I did it, she acknowledged me, and not one time in 7 years has she ever said to me, where are my flowers? Right? She just continues to acknowledge me and thank me because it makes her feel good, so I keep doing it. And as Tom Peters, who I very much respect and admire, says, celebrate what you want to see more of.
Exactly.
So then we get it.
And never once has she said to you, when you bring the flowers, well, what are these for? She's just appreciative.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That is truly a wonderful thing, and I'll have to go chat with the missus about this one. It's interesting, though, in lesson number 2, Mike talks about choosing positive thoughts and feelings. Again, it's easy to poo-poo this, but I'd like you to take a look at the U.S. Open golf tournament this year. Tiger Woods was there, and Tiger, through his partnership with American Express, was asked to give a clinic, a golf clinic, to 80 members who had paid quite a sum to watch him play golf. And so he took them on a practice round. One of the members asked Tiger if he would show how he would chip out from a sand trap. Tiger was very clear and said, no, I won't do that. The member, of course, said, well, why? I'd really like to see it. And Tiger said, I do not wish to have those negative kind of thoughts. On the flip side, we have Phil Mickelson, who spent quite a bit of time there chipping from the rough and what have you, and wound up injuring his wrist. Now, Phil, as I remember, missed the cut, didn't finish the tournament, and Tiger placed second. So again, choosing positive thoughts and feelings. Mike, what are your thoughts on those? What is the power of thinking?
Well, I mean, as we all know, it's what goes on in here and in here that really dictates ultimately our success. I mean, I can remember as a baseball player, I'd get on the pitcher's mound, and you know, my arm could feel great, my body could be good, I could be all locked in, but if I wasn't had it up here or in here, I was a mess. And there were times I didn't feel all that good physically, but mentally and emotionally I was in a good place. So I think almost everyone has a lot of experiences where their thoughts and their feelings have impacted ultimately the outcome of anything. The thing to remember is that we actually have more to say about our thoughts and our feelings than we think. Again, we're not victims of them. And that's the thing, to be able to distinguish and notice, I'm having that thought, what's leading to that feeling. And then, again, remember, it's not avoidance, but it's choosing. Okay, so can I express some of these more negative emotions, negative thoughts that I have in a way that gets me back into that more positive state of being? You know, a sports psychologist I worked with at Stanford told me, Mike, when you have a negative thought, you've got to acknowledge it and then replace it. You can't just pretend it's not there. So part of it is embracing some of our sort of knee-jerk negative reactions so as to then choose more positive responses. Yeah.
Next week, we'll be tackling some of the other lessons that Mike brings up in the book. And until then, Mike, thank you.
Thank you.